So during these days, there's a Mind and Life conference with His Holiness in Dharamsala, and the theme is imagining a flourishing humanity. And it's focusing a lot on how to integrate some Dharma principles with education. And so how to teach children how to identify their emotions, how to work with their emotions, how to communicate better with other living beings, and to start doing that at, a young age in elementary school. And the purpose is to teach them to be good citizens. And from His Holiness's viewpoint, that means being compassionate people. And of course, the compassion has to reach beyond just the people in our own group or in our own country, and really extend to all living beings, because we are interrelated. If our compassion is limited only to the people that we are close to or that we identify with, then very easily that compassion becomes attachment, and then we develop aversion for whoever is different from us, or whoever we think is different from us. So we see here why to develop compassion it's so important to have equanimity between friend, enemy, and stranger, and also to equalize self and others so that all of us are on a level playing field, so that we can spread our compassion to each and every living being, ourselves and others, without omitting anyone. So that's a tall order for a mind that has an opinion factory that works overtime, that loves to judge other people. But once we can really see that opinion factory for what it is, and shut the whole thing down, like these steel plants that Trump is so worried about that died several decades ago. Shut down our opinion factory and give our mind some space to really approach others as kind living beings who want happiness and not suffering. And train our mind to see just that. And in that way, have tolerance. Not just tolerance, but concern, compassion for each and every living being. And compassion that's strong enough to motivate us to overcome all of our own obstacles to omniscience, so that we can serve others best. And so it's with that attitude that we want to listen to teachings. So our purpose in attaining full awakening is to be able to serve others most effectively. And serving others is done with a mind that is very humble. Yeah. So you can be a leader but be a humble leader. Yeah. We can't really serve others if our self-centeredness is running the show and we're wanting recognition and acknowledgement and so on. So this humble mind is really quite important. You know, and to keep in mind that our purpose is to serve. Yeah. It's not to, what's the word, commandeer? Yeah. Yeah, it's to serve. Okay. Okay. So, did you do your homework? Mm-hmm. Okay, so did you come up with some syllogisms? Yeah, Venerable Lamsal gave me her sheet here. Where is she? Oh, there you are. Okay. But somebody else may want to put forth theirs. You want to start?
I have my 7 Pure Land ones, but I also have my negative one now. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, we wanted to do the ones with negatives.
Okay, here's my negative. Consider the subject Sampa. It is not a suitable food for the American monk Venerable Thupten Losang because it is made from a grain that is not gluten-free.
Whoa.
I'll read it again.
Yes.
Consider the subject Sampa.
Uh-huh.
It is not a suitable food for the American monk Venerable Thupten Losang because it is made from a grain that is not gluten-free.
Okay, so your predicate is negative.
Both are negative.
No. You know, it's made from a grain. A grain is...
That is not gluten-free.
But I don't know if that's a negative.
Not gluten-free? I mean, I got in trouble because gluten-free itself is a negative, but not gluten-free, I think. Well,
because it's made from a grain, but a grain is a positive. It is not made from a gluten-free grain, would be a negative.
Made from a gluten-free grain.
Yeah. Saying it's made from a grain that is not gluten-free, it's made from a grain. A grain is a positive thing. If you're going to make your reason, it is not made from a gluten-free grain.
Made from a grain that is gluten-free.
No, it is not made from a gluten-free grain.
It is not made from a gluten-free grain. Okay. It's not made.
Okay.
From a gluten-free grain. Okay.
Okay.
Well, then my reasoning doesn't... Sampa is made from a grain that is not gluten-free. But that Sampa is made from a grain that is not...
No, but your subject is Venerable Losang.
No, my subject is Sampa.
No, you said...
The subject is Sampa.
Is Sampa. Okay, it's not a... Okay. Uh-huh. So Sampa is not a gluten-free grain.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Any grain that is not gluten-free is necessarily not suitable food for Venerable Losang.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
Well, if he were starving...
If he were starving, it would make him sicker. True? True. True. I think it holds.
Okay.
Therefore.
And my P inside ring is not gluten-free, and my Q is not suitable food outside ring. But that part I'm not so clear about.
Yeah. When you, it's interesting to draw the pictures. Yeah, because your circle now is going to be a circle of not gluten-free. Instead of it being a positive thing, it's a circle of not gluten-free and not a food,
Not a suitable.
not a suitable food.
Right.
Yeah.
So not a suitable food is bigger than not gluten-free, because he also can't eat dairy.
Yeah.
I don't know why I got on this, but
Yeah. Okay, so the range of not gluten-free is a smaller range than of
not
not
suitable
a suitable food.
Yes.
Okay, so how would you draw that?
Like that.
Well, can you describe it? Which?
So the not suitable food is the outside ring, and the not gluten-free is the inside ring.
Mm-hmm. And where is Sampa?
I didn't get that far.
You got to put Sampa.
So Sampa is inside the not gluten-free ring.
Yeah, it's inside both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Buddhists do not get upset because they don't take things personally.
Buddhists do not get upset because they don't take things personally. Okay.
So,
So-
the first is Buddhists don't take things personally.
Mm-hmm.
And the pervasion is, if you do not take things personally, you will not get upset. You will necessarily not get upset.
If you don't take things personally, you will necessarily not get upset. Couldn't you get upset? Could you get upset for some other reason? Now, if you don't take things, so what's the bigger ring here?
They're equal.
Hmm?
They're equal.
Oh, but you could get upset. You could, or not get upset for a bunch of other different reasons. It's true. If you don't take things personally, you won't get upset. But it's not that if you don't get upset, you necessarily don't take things personally. Or is it?
You could be asleep.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So if you don't take things personally, then you necessarily don't get upset. How's that sound? True? Can you is there a situation where if you don't take things personally, you still get upset?
You can be upset about people getting shot in school.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You can get upset about who's leading the country.
Okay. So, but it's saying if you don't take things personally, you necessarily don't get upset. So that's saying getting upset, or it's saying that. What would your circles be? Because it's a curious one. If you don't take things personally, if we just look at that, if you don't take things personally, then you necessarily don't get upset. Yeah. There's kind of two ways to think about that. Or is it, if you don't get upset, you necessarily haven't taken things personally. So remember one time before we did one and we reversed the predicate and the reason? So which is the bigger circle here? if you don't take things, the circle of not taking things personally, and the circle of not getting upset.
Seems to me there's 4 possibilities.
You think there's 4 possibilities? Okay, what are those 4 possibilities? Because if it's 4 possibilities, then the syllogism's not going to work.
So something that would be both would be like, you got in my face, and I took it personally. You both. Or get upset.
No, because it has to be something that is both not taking things personally and not getting upset. Okay, so what would be an example of that?
As a human being, you can't take things personally. And it says
Petting my cat. I'm not taking things personally. I'm not getting upset. That'd be like anything.
Okay. So not taking things.
I can't be taking things personally.
So you're saying petting your cat is an example of
I'm
both
not getting
things.
upset, and I'm not taking things personally.
Okay.
Or just say looking at a deer. Yes.
Yeah, looking at a deer would be both. She's thinking more, I think, of somebody who criticizes you and is something. If you don't take it personally,
Right.
you don't take personally somebody criticizing you, and you don't get upset when somebody criticizes you. So that would be the overlapping thing.
Yes.
Okay. Now, is there a situation where you don't take things personally, but you do get upset?
I'm in Venerable Sompton's camp.
So I still think yes, because you can be moved by acts of cruelty. You're not taking it personally, but you're upset that this suffering is happening to others.
like compassion.
Yeah.
Right, so we have to qualify it.
So upset is maybe a bit too vague. Maybe that's the troubling word.
Oh, it's funny with the negatives in. The negatives make it strange, not getting upset. Because if we look at people who don't get upset, if we're looking only at people who don't take things personally, if there's a situation where you don't take things personally, then are you necessarily not going to get upset? No, you could. Well, you could get upset for another reason.
An example might be like Martin Luther King's upset about the lack of civil rights, but I don't think he was doing a personal kind of thing. There are examples of being upset. The problem is with the word upset. I mean, he would care deeply, or the Dalai Lama caring deeply. Are they upset? But there's some sort of emotional component. So they're not identical circles. There's upsetness and then taking things personally.
So maybe we need a little bit more clarity on what some of the words mean. Yeah, I think what you're trying to say is people who don't take things personally. We would like to say everybody who doesn't take things personally doesn't get upset, but that's not true. Yeah, because you could get upset for some other reason. Yeah, or what you're trying to say is if you take things personally, you will necessarily get upset. That's what you're trying to say. Yeah. So how would you make that one into a syllogism? Because that's what you're trying to.
But I think the counter provision works. If you get upset, you are necessarily taking things personally.
No, if you're getting upset, you aren't necessarily taking things personally. Because, like somebody was saying, if Martin Luther King was upset about civil rights, but he wasn't necessarily taking it personally. Or we can look at, what's going on in Syria, and it's very upsetting, but I'm not taking it personally. Yeah. So I think what you're really trying to show is when somebody takes things personally, then they necessarily get upset. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that if they don't take things personally, they're necessarily not going to get upset. Although it should, if you put knots on both sides, it should work, but it's not working, is it?
I really think it depends on what upset means, because to me, upset is like a disturbed, upset mind, right? So when I hear even about the Syria thing, there's a part of the personal distress comes to mind when I think that. Whereas not taking it personally is being able to be sad or horrified or want to take action, but it's still not upset because it's not taken personally, right? So I think upset's the thing that needs to be defined.
I think we have to look at what taking it personal means.
Yes.
It's kind of like what she's saying. I think if we're upset, we need to look and stop and see, are we taking this personal? Even if it's somebody we don't know and it's something we read in the news.
Yeah.
A lot of it being personal distress is a personal thing.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. Does personal distress mean that you're taking it personally? I don't think so. Yeah. Well, like I was saying, like if you're upset over, I was giving the example of Syria, and, it's upsetting for me personally to see what's going on in Syria, but I'm not taking it personally in the sense of, I'm involved and I'm going to get hurt and something's hurting me. It's not hurting me, but it's still something I find upsetting. And I don't think it's gotten into personal distress.
How would a Buddha look at Syria and feel upset?
Pardon?
Would a Buddha look at Syria's situation and feel upset?
I don't think he'd be happy. He would, this is, what does the word upset mean? Yeah.
Substitute anger.
Yeah, be more specific.
Mm-hmm.
Please use the microphone, otherwise people at home don't have a clue what we're talking about.
What'd you say?
I said, please use the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise people at home don't have a clue what this subcontext is.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry, when the battery goes out, then this blocks my hearing and I can't hear as well because it fills up the whole little chamber. She changed the things. Okay. So it went out in the middle. Oh, should we try another one since we're stuck on? It might be good to define what upset means. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When we were doing our homework this afternoon, with the counter provision, when you've got knots in, then how does it work with the counter provision? Should I give you an example?
Yeah.
Okay. The cat named Upeka is not a dog because the cat named Upeka is not a canid.
Is not a what?
A canid. So I went with canine.
Canine.
Canid is the more appropriate group that includes dogs and wolves and jackals and everything.
Uh-huh.
So the property is the cat named Upeka is not a canid. The provision is whatever is not a canid is necessary.
Canine.
Well, but the family is candid.
Candid. Oh, okay.
So I had canine at first, but anyway, whatever is not a candid is necessarily not a dog. So, I'm sorry? So the counter provision is, do you then put in not?
Yeah.
So it turns it into a positive.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one isn't the one I'm thinking of. We got stuck on this one about uncompounded space. Okay, uncompounded space is not impermanent because it's not changing moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
So the provision is whatever is not changing moment by moment is necessarily not impermanent.
Mm-hmm.
And the counter provision is whatever is permanent, because not impermanent is permanent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is changing moment by moment. So it doesn't work.
What's the first one? What's your original syllogism?
Yeah.
Not impermanent is impermanent. Yeah.
Not impermanent is impermanent. Oh, okay, that was our mistake then.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, took up your space.
Yeah. You want to hear some? I was trying to make them things, that people say and think now. Okay. Okay. Now, what do you think of this one? Okay. A Republican is wait. A Republican is is not a gun control advocate because he is not a Democrat.
That sounds like trouble.
No, but this is why I wanted to bring it up, because this is
an assumption.
this is what people are thinking. Yeah?
Yep.
A Republican is not a gun control advocate because he's not a Democrat. So a Republican is not a Democrat.
Okay. Clear.
Okay? And if you're not a Democrat, then you're not a gun control advocate. Is that true?
Necessarily.
No, that one doesn't hold. So this argument doesn't hold. But this is something that people easily think, even though that's why I was making these kinds of things. Okay.
How does the counter provision hold? If you're a Democrat, you're necessarily a gun control advocate.
No. If you're the counter provision would be if you're a gun control advocate, then you're necessarily a Democrat. That's not right. No. Okay. But if you're not a Democrat, yeah, so that's why the whole thing doesn't work. Okay. How about, Sam is a jerk because of being someone who doesn't agree with my ideas. This is what we think, isn't it? Okay. So is that a good syllogism? Sam is a jerk because of being someone who doesn't agree with me.
Probably the subject works.
So Sam is someone who doesn't agree with my ideas. You have to get more specific. Which ideas?
About gun control.
Okay. Okay. So Sam is a jerk because he doesn't, because of being someone, you have to make it into nouns, because of being someone, or because of not being someone who agrees with my ideas. Because you can't say Sam is a jerk because of not agreeing with my ideas, because, well, we often think that way. Sam doesn't agree with my ideas. So, about gun control, okay? So then, if someone doesn't agree, with my ideas about gun control, then he is necessarily a jerk. Are you sure?
Only in your own mind.
But this is how people think, isn't it?
Yes, but just because he might be a jerk to you doesn't make him a jerk to me.
Just because,
If he's a jerk to you doesn't make him a jerk to me.
yeah. But we think that if he's a jerk to me, then he must be a jerk to everybody.
You don't care.
Okay, what else did I have here? Oh, here's one. A gun control advocate is not someone who respects the Constitution because of being someone who opposes the Second Amendment. A lot of people think this too. Is it a correct syllogism?
No.
Why not?
Yes, the subject is not established. Yes, but there's a line.
Subject is a gun control advocate is someone who opposes the Second Amendment. That's not true. But that's what some people think. And then the pervasion would be, if you're someone who opposes the Second Amendment, then you're necessarily someone who doesn't respect the Constitution. That's also not true. But do you see how so much of what we say and think in our political discussions is based on things that do not form valid syllogisms? Okay, someone else want to give theirs? Do you want to do one of yours, Venerable Lamsel?
The mental factors of love and hatred cannot exist in the same moment of mind because they are opposing mental factors. The first one is mental factors of love and hatred are opposing mental factors.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pervasion would be whatever opposing mental factors cannot exist in the same moment of mind. So therefore love and hatred can't exist in the same moment of mind.
So
Yeah?
There's a slight problem with the wording because it sounds like you have an is statement and an exist statement in the same syllogism.
No, what's the...
Read the
Yeah.
syllogism.
Yeah.
The mental factors of love and hatred cannot exist in the same moment of mind because they are opposing mental factors.
So they can't exist because they are. I think those are contradictory.
No.
You know, there's all this
Sometimes
comment about
Yeah.
having the same mode of abiding in the, there has to be
No.
compatibility
But on-
between the predicate and the reason.
Can you... I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're...
The mental factors of love and hatred
No.
cannot exist in
Yeah,
the
no,
same
I'm not
moment.
understanding what she's saying. Just because you say do not exist and you say because they are, how does that necessarily...
In a lot of in some of the definitions, let me see if I can find one quickly. In some of the definitions, it talks about how there has to be this compatibility within the mode of the.
There's either there's either exist... Well, we're getting into that in the next chapter, but, exist statements and what was the other one? And is statements. Yeah,
I'll see if I can find the definition that would support what I'm saying.
yeah.
So I don't see friends because my mind is not pure.
I don't see friends because my mind is not pure. So what's the pervasion? Or what's the property?
So my mind is not pure. And then the perversion is, if my mind is not pure, I necessarily do not see friends.
That true?
Or maybe to put friends, change it to goodness. Okay.
See goodness.
Say it
I'm
again.
trying to link this back to the Amitabha teaching. Like, if your mind is not pure, then you don't see people's goodness.
Is that, does that mean your mind has to be 100% pure to see people's goodness?
So would you have to qualify then? I don't see goodness all the time because my mind is not pure.
Yeah. I'm thinking we should probably be using instead things like if we say, I am someone who doesn't see friends because I'm someone who doesn't see goodness. That's a better way to do it. You can draw more distinct, you have to put nouns in there. So then I'm someone who doesn't see goodness. No, I'm someone who doesn't
See goodness all the time.
see goodness all the time.
Because I'm someone whose mind is not pure.
No. What your syllogism is, I am someone who doesn't see goodness because
My mind is not pure.
because my mind is not, because I'm someone whose mind is not pure. So if you say, I am someone whose mind is not pure, sometimes you can have a pure mind, can't you?
Yeah, pure of what?
Yeah, pure of what? What does pure mean? That you don't have any defilements whatsoever?
I've come to in trying to do these is I have to write definitions of what the, like what, I have to make them like this, and then some work, some don't. But in that process, I'm finding I have to write a definition of what pure is. By the time I do that, sometimes I just put that in instead of the word pure.
Yeah.
In some of mine, it's made it work better.
So does it mean...
Because I had one like peace of mind. And I knew if I brought that in, you'd go, what in the heck is that? So I defined it to myself, which was absence of manifest afflictions. And then I decided, well, let's just put that in instead of peace of mind.
Right.
Because it's clear.
Yeah,
So I found that writing definitions was helpful. Because I like to look at these kind of things.
Because what does pure mean? Does it mean that you have no manifest afflictions, or does it mean that you have no afflictions whatsoever in your mind stream and you are either an arhat or a Buddha? Yeah. So then would your syllogism be, I don't see goodness because I'm not an arhat or a Buddha? So, okay, you're not an arhat or a Buddha, but if someone is not an arhat or a Buddha, do they necessarily not see goodness?
But if you put all the time, then that could be true.
Where are you going to put all the time?
Goodness all the time.
But pure view.
Yeah. But what, yeah, so you don't see, so then it would be, if you're someone who's not an arhat or a Buddha, then you don't see, you don't have pure view.
I'm someone who doesn't have pure view because I'm someone who's not an arhat.
But what does pure view mean? Because arhats don't have pure view from the viewpoint of mistaken appearances still appearing to them. So what are you saying is pure view? Just that you like people, or that you're seeing everybody as deities?
Actually, for me, that articulates why it's so difficult for me in the teachings. Like we get all these teachings that we do talk about this as well, right? Like we want to have pure view. You don't see pure view because your mind is not pure. I mean, you don't see goodness because your mind is not pure. And what does that mean?
Yeah. So that's what we need to think about. What does that mean? Yeah. And if somebody makes a statement like that in teachings, you have to figure out what it is they mean. Yeah. Are they saying that, that because you have some afflictions, that therefore you don't see goodness? What I'm saying is we have to think about what that person's trying to say. Yeah. And how they're defining the words.
And I find just instead of what I kind of came to is instead of trying to make all these things work, I decided what's beneficial for me out of this is the process of thinking about this.
Yeah.
Because it's helped me to kind of clarify things and realize that many of the things I read, because I be reading things and I try to make them into a syllogism, and it's just like a mess. But in the process
will expire in 10 minutes.
Okay, don't turn it off yet. It still has 10 minutes.
I wonder why that's happening. Anyway, So I found that the process of thinking this way is more the goal for me now,
right?
Rather than always getting one that works.
And also realizing that it's not like everything we say has to fit into a syllogism. Yeah, because syllogisms are not for giving advice. Yeah, you don't use syllogisms for giving advice. You don't use syllogisms for, necessarily making decisions. Yeah, you're using a syllogism to try and understand what something is. Yeah, so if we're trying to put decisions, advice, what was the other one? Judgments, value judgments. Yeah, into syllogistic form, we're probably going to get pretty stuck. Yeah, because you were only supposed to use syllogisms for certain things. It's not like everything. Yeah.
I read something this week by Lama Tsongkhapa about this, and he said that these were. It's kind of like, I'll just say it in my own words. This tool of syllogisms is really for like refuting these existential views, those kind of views. And then I also think, but what Dan Perdue says is that anything where you can have any kind of system that has a lot of definitions, where you can make categories of things, you can probably use this for.
Yeah.
So I think it's viable, but it's going to be pretty tough for things that you can't really define well.
Right.
Almost like impossible.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the thing, that what we're doing here and seeing where we get stuck is part of the benefit of that, is seeing that we don't really, when we say things, we're not really always sure what we mean. Or we're assuming that the other person has the same definition of a word as we do. And that isn't always the case. Yeah. So I think that's the benefit in some ways of, we keep trying to make different syllogisms and getting stuck. But I think there's a benefit to that, and like you said, Jay Rinpoche said, the purpose is to refute wrong views. It's not to, give advice or make political statements or judge people we use it. We try and make syllogisms that come out like that, but they don't work very well. Yeah, because we're not really even so sure ourselves what we mean and what we're trying to prove. Yeah?
Can I give one? A sincere Buddhist practitioner is not afraid of receiving admonition from her teacher because she is intent on learning from her mistakes and faults.
That's the two negatives.
Okay.
It could be one or two. Didn't have to be
Okay, put the nouns in there.
No.
A sincere Buddhist practitioner is someone
who's not afraid of receiving admonition from her teacher
because
he or she is intent on learning from their mistakes and faults.
yeah, because there's someone who's intent on learning from their mistakes. Okay. So how's that one work? What's the property?
A sincere practitioner is intent on learning from his or her mistakes.
But do they always? But does such a person always receive the admonition? What's the word? Not unafraid. It's not. They,
No,
they
okay.
could. In other words, they could be quite sincere, but then not.
So let's do it with.
Your conference will expire.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Do it with the property and the pervasion. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Someone who's a sincere Buddhist practitioner is
someone who is, what is the word? Intent on learning from their mistakes. But what happened to the receiving?
No, we're just doing the property.
Okay.
Yeah. So is it true that a sincere Buddhist practitioner is intent on learning from their mistakes?
Yes. You may not always do it, but they're intent on
it. Maybe the thing is they are intent, but maybe what comes out of this is we are not always a Buddhist practitioner. Yeah. If we say a Buddhist practitioner, is someone who is intent on learning from their mistakes. Sound good. Okay. Then, if you're someone who's intent on learning from your mistakes, then you are not necessarily afraid of receiving admonition from your teacher. Mm-hmm. That sounds good too. Now the question is, am I a sincere Buddhist practitioner? At the time of receiving the admonition? Or am I an ordinary, ego-sensitive, wimp? At the yeah.
I think the counter provision doesn't hold either. As in, if I am afraid of receiving admonition from my teacher,
if I'm not someone, if I'm not someone.
But I mean the counter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you're not someone who's not afraid of receiving admonition from your teacher, then you're necessarily not intent on learning from your mistakes.
Right. So if I'm not someone who's not afraid, meaning I'm afraid of receiving admonition from my teacher, right? That's the counter provision, right?
Now, if you're not someone who is not afraid,
yeah, I am afraid.
Then you are. No, then you're not someone who's not afraid. Then the counter provision is if you're not. It's not afraid.
He's not.
Yeah, not afraid.
So you are afraid.
Yeah.
If you are afraid of receiving your admonition from your teacher, then you are not intent on learning from your mistakes.
Right.
Yeah, so that doesn't hold. I am
terrified of receiving admonition from my teacher because I think that's wise. I don't know. It's like they're not. How do I say it? They're pointing out that you're making you're going to harm yourself. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a wise fear. Could that work? Like it's not necessarily panic fear. Like you don't want to receive admonition from your teacher. But, you know what I mean? I am afraid. Like I do think, would I want to like do this and have Venerable yell at me? I really don't think so. And she's not yelling at me because she's upset or angry. It's because I'm doing something really that is going to create negative karma.
Yeah. Okay, so here again, we need to understand what the words mean. Yeah. 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 Because you're saying you could be afraid of receiving admonition, but the reason you're afraid is because you're concerned about creating negative karma and doing harmful actions. Not being afraid, it's not the fear of I'm getting criticized. Yeah.
You could just be afraid because you have a history of being traumatized by being yelled at, and that doesn't mean that you're not intent on trying to change that and learn.
What? So if you're not, so what are you saying?
I'm saying that somebody could be afraid. They could, even if it is inappropriate, it doesn't mean that they're not.
Your conference has expired. Thank you for using this service.
Thank you.
Doesn't mean that your contents have to expire. No, wait. You could be afraid even in a negative way, and it doesn't mean that you're not intent on trying to learn from your mistakes. You could just be that's part of your baggage.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you're I'm getting all my knots confused. I'm getting knotted up here.
Not afraid.
Are we looking at the pervasion or the counter-pervasion?
The counter-pervasion.
Okay, so let's do the syllogism again. Yeah. Someone who is a genuine Buddhist practitioner is
not afraid of receiving admonition from their teacher. Is someone who's not afraid of receiving admonition from their teacher because of being someone who's intent on learning from their mistakes and faults.
Yeah. Sure. So if you're someone who is intent on learning from your mistakes, then you are necessarily not someone who is afraid of receiving admonition from your teacher. Now, she said that doesn't hold because she's talking about a different kind of fear. Okay? But you're saying, okay.
I'm saying it doesn't hold because you could still be sincere and have fear. It's just that we're sentient beings with...
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the thing. Why are we afraid? It's because it's our own afflictions.
Yeah, well, we need to learn that, but that doesn't mean we won't still have that come up.
But that's the point. At that minute, when we don't want to hear, we may be... At that minute, when we are blocking the advice and stuck in our fear because we've been traumatized before, at that moment, are we a sincere Buddhist practitioner?
We could even sincerely be taking it in and still be afraid because that's what we got going on.
Do you think...
Trying,
Yeah. So you're saying if it's someone who's not afraid, and if it's someone who sincerely wants to learn from their mistakes, then you're saying the privation would be then they're necessarily someone who is not afraid of receiving admonition. And you're saying if there's someone who's sincerely want to learn from their mistakes, they are not necessarily. Yeah, they are not necessarily not afraid.
Not necessarily afraid.
They're not necessarily not afraid. Not afraid. Which means they're not necessarily not afraid. They're not someone who's not, no. No, that's not it.
That's what he's pointing at. They could be afraid.
You could be afraid. Yeah.
They could be afraid and sincerely trying to follow the advice anyways, even though they're afraid. They could be
that you're sincerely trying to learn from your mistakes, and you're someone who is afraid of receiving admonition.
And you're still a sincere Buddhist practitioner.
At that very moment?
It depends on how you react to your fear.
Sincere practitioner. What is a sincere practitioner? I mean, there's some definitions.
Yeah.
We'd have to figure out what a sincere practitioner is.
Yeah. What is a sincere practitioner? And what does it mean to be afraid of advice? Because there's different kinds of being afraid of advice. Yeah. Maybe it's, we would figure out what a sincere Buddhist practitioner is and say is receptive to admonition because they're intent on learning from their mistakes. Yeah, that might be better than saying they're not afraid, but saying, because just because someone's not afraid doesn't mean they're receptive. Yeah, you can tell me anything you want, but screw you. Okay, yeah. Maybe we better stick with an octopus is not a cat because it's not a mammal. Yeah. Yeah, but you see, it's helping us see, like, exactly how specific we have to get, really, for things to make sense. And how often our speech is, we just say it and we assume that what we're saying makes sense. And we assume the other person has the same definition. And we assume we even have a definition for the words. And sometimes we don't. Somebody says, what does it mean to be a sincere Buddhist practitioner? What does that mean?
I was trying to think of it in terms of intention in there. And you could have a lot of different intentions and still maybe be called sincere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so does one impure intention make you not sincere? Well, it depends upon if that's the button that's getting pushed at that moment. Okay, let's do chapter 8, okay? So, so keep writing syllogisms, okay? And, keep playing around with the knots and see how many you can release and not get tied up in. Okay. So, chapter 8, 3 types of correct signs. So it will be helpful to understand something more of the range of correct syllogism as Buddhists understand them. The few comments here are just a gesture towards a topic that is treated in a much vaster way a little later on in the traditional study of Buddhist reasoning and debate. This presentation is based in the collected topics tradition of Buddhist reasoning as practiced in Tibetan Buddhism. In turn, that is all based in Indian thought. So then now he's going to describe a little bit about collected topics, which is, I think, useful for people to know. Rather than being a single text, collected topics, we usually call it Dura. Yeah. Collected topic texts form a genre of literature in Tibetan, and there are many versions of such text. That's, something. As soon as you have many versions, you're going to have different opinions about what things mean. Something I'm working on right now in the book, it's like, okay, Panchen Sonam Jakpa says this, and Chuki Alpha says this, and, Jamyang Shepa says this, and so what do I write? Well, they told me don't put in any of the things from the Yiksha. The Yiksha are these texts, because then it makes His Holiness look like he's biased towards one of the monasteries or the other. And that's just within the Galupas. Who knows what the Karyunima and Sadhya are talking, and what about the Theravadas? So anyway, okay, so the collected topics text by Prabhu Chokjampa Gyaltso, known as the Tutors Collected Topics, because he was one of the tutors of the 13th Dalai Lama, for whom he wrote the text, was the source of debate in Tibetan Buddhism. So you see, this Dura text was not written that long ago. Because His Holiness was 13th Dalai Lama, was alive 100 years ago. So this text was maybe written, I don't know, a little bit more than 100 years ago when the 13th Dalai Lama was a little boy. Okay, so that text is divided into three major parts, consisting of the introductory path of reasoning, the middling path of reasoning, and the greater path of reasoning. The greater path of reasoning contains a book-length presentations of awareness and knowledge, that's the low rig that we've studied, and also signs and reasoning, or tarig, as well as other collected topics. So that's all in the greater path of reasoning. The division into introductory, middling, and greater paths of reasoning accords with the capacity of the student. The debaters speak of gaining the path of reasoning, meaning that the person has developed a certain capacity and facility with the procedure in debate. Those who have the path of reasoning debate without hesitation and indecision because they know well the implications of both their own and others' assertions and immediately draw out those implications and possible interpretations of what was said. So here you can see that, at our level, we do not have the path of reasoning. Yeah? Okay. So one scholar noted that reasoning in the expression, the path of reasoning, has the same meaning as correctness and suitability. That water flows downhill accords with reasoning, correctness, and suitability. Since we can see strongly billowing smoke on a mountain pass, and we know that wherever there is smoke, there is fire, we may conclude that fire exists on that smoking mountain pass. By the power of the facts, we are able to establish reasonably, correctly, and suitably that fire exists in that place. By this interpretation, a path of reasoning also means a path of correctness and a path of suitability. This gesture to the three types of correct signs is drawn from the Signs and Reasonings literature as presented by my old debating partner, Catherine Manchester Rogers, in her work of amazing scholarship, Tibetan Logic, which we have in the library, and that is presented according to the Sao Tantric view. In that work, correct signs are divided in several ways, but the main division is a division by way of entity into three: correct effect signs, correct nature signs, and correct signs of non-observation. Okay. The three types of correct signs support Buddhist learning and practice because they train a person in cause and effect, the entity or nature of things in the world, and the way of understanding the existence of something by a negative route of reasoning. Cause and effect are of essential importance in Buddhism because from the beginning, the Buddha described a cause and effect link between our sufferings and our actions, and a cause and effect link between new actions on the path and the effect of liberation from suffering. So that's really important, that to know that, that Buddha was really talking about cause and effect there. And that's why His Holiness says that if Buddha had a brand, it would be dependent arising. Okay, so here, causal dependent arising. Also, from the beginning, understanding the nature of things, especially understanding the nature of impermanent phenomena, supports breaking through to new actions on the path. Correct signs, what does he mean by supports breaking through to new actions on the path? Oh, okay. Because if you understand the nature of impermanent things, then your behavior will be more in line with the true paths. Okay, so you're creating new actions on the path. Correct signs of non-observation were set forth for the sake of realizing that all things are selfless. So you don't observe a self, so that acts as a reason. Buddhists describe reality with negative terms such as selflessness or emptiness and seek to discover the final nature of reality of a thing by eliminating what is not there in the nature of a thing in order to understand what remains when the self that a thing is empty of is eliminated. So what he's trying to say is, when we eliminate inherent existence, what is left over? And whatever is left over is what exists. Yeah. The great, but we eliminate inherent existence, and then things still look the same to us. They haven't changed at all. The great Nyingma Lama, Dogo Khyentse Rinpoche, described this approach as like capturing a snake by setting down a cage over it. Does anybody understand that? Anyway, one thing I was thinking that His Holiness says a lot is, he first of all says that you can prove rebirth by using reasoning. Yeah, but all the people who are skeptical of rebirth, they cannot prove the non-existence of rebirth. So there's a difference between saying, I don't believe in rebirth, and being able to prove the non-existence of rebirth.
I just was thinking right now that maybe what he's saying there is like, when you're doing, trying to identify the object of negation, you have to identify something. Mm-hmm. So that would be like setting a cage over something that's hard to get your hands on, like a snake, because it's hard to get your hands on the object of negation. I don't know. Just an idea.
I think what it means is you put the cage over the snake and the snake goes out because a cage doesn't hold the snake. So that's just like what you said. We defeat the inherent existence, but then we turn around and it's right there. So because there's a kakyu kind of saying that's very close to that. Like you didn't really do it, you thought you did. but the snake is still gone out.
Yeah.
You still think everything's
except yeah, he's trying to use that as an example to show, what is not there. He's not using that example to show that we don't really negate inherent existence. It's somehow capturing a snake by setting down a cage over it is something like eliminating what is not there so you can find out what is there. So I don't get it. Anyway, okay. You can meditate on that as you're falling asleep tonight. Okay, so where are we? Correct effect signs. In a syllogism with a correct effect sign, the sign is an effect, and the predicate of the probandum, what the sign proves, is the cause of that effect. The classic example of a syllogism with an effect sign is the subject on that mountain pass. There is a fire because there is strongly billowing smoke. Okay. Although many questions arise in our minds, and that is appropriate, you would have few questions if you came home and saw strongly billowing smoke coming out of your house. Yeah, you would probably get what's happening. Yeah. Inference, the intellectual understanding that can result from reasoning, is a way of understanding the presence of something that is not observed directly. Even without seeing the fire, by the reason of the presence of smoke and the knowledge that wherever there is smoke, there is fire, you understand that your house is burning down. Yeah. You can prove the cause by knowledge of the effect, but you cannot reliably prove the effect by knowledge of the cause. In other words, just because the cause is present doesn't mean the effect is going to come. Yeah, because you could have a seed that, isn't watered and it doesn't have, or is plucked from the ground and burned, and you're not going to have the result. So just because the cause is there doesn't mean that the effect is there in the very next moment, because you need all sorts of other causes, all sorts of causes and conditions to come together. Okay, for instance, if you come home to your apartment and it was all torn up and your valuable stuff was gone, you would think that someone had robbed you. Yeah? So there you're seeing the effect, and then the cause is somebody robbed me. However, if you are leaving your apartment and you see some shady dude hanging out, you cannot from that alone know that your apartment will be robbed. Okay. Now this is how a lot of prejudice happens in society. It's because people are reasoning not from the presence of the effect, meaning that the cause is there, but they're reasoning that if the cause is if a certain cause is there, that definitely a certain effect is going to happen. And that's how prejudice works. The sight of a particular person from a particular minority means they're a criminal. This is what Trump is saying. If they're Mexican, they are a rapist and a murderer. Okay? So, but that's rubbish. Yeah. So you can't reason like that. Yeah. Because if you do your circles, it's not going to be a 3P. It's going to be, a 4 thing. Okay. Still, you ought to be cautious, Well, maybe you ought to be cautious, but you should probably be cautious, even if the guy is not necessarily a shady dude, but somebody who's clean cut. Yeah. Why are we not cautious when we see a clean cut guy, especially since all the clanners are the KKK is dressing up now as clean cut all American people?
They always did. They always did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, but we think if somebody looks like a shady guy, no matter what a shady dude looks like, then they're necessarily going to rob our place. But if somebody looks clean cut as an American, they're not going to, and that's rubbish. Yeah.
They're more dangerous.
What? They're what?
The people that are not suspected of things are more dangerous, because when they do go criminal, they usually do more harm. Like Ted Bundy, for example. Or they said that guy about the guy at Michigan State. The guy at Michigan State, Larry Nassar, that's exactly what they said. The profile is somebody who you don't suspect, because they have all your trust and everything.
Yeah.
Or the entire subprime mortgage crisis. All these people selling down Wall Street, they look very clean cut.
Yeah.
They destroy your life savings, right? Mm-hmm. They sold you stuff that wasn't even there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So these are the kinds of things, that we have to notice in our own mind when we're making circles that are inaccurate and they're actually just prejudice and stereotypes. The more traditional example is that the presence of smoke, an effect of fire, proves the presence of fire. But the presence of fire, the cause of smoke, does not prove the presence of smoke, because sometimes there is a smokeless fire, such as with the sun. Yeah? Okay? Then, correct nature signs. The second type of correct sign is a correct nature sign. In a syllogism with a correct nature sign, the sign and the predicate to be proven are of the same nature or of the same entity. This translation, because there's two Tibetan words, what is it? There's Rongzhen and Ningpo. So Jeffrey, of course, has to find two separate words. But when you say things are one entity, it's in English, it sounds like they're exactly the same. Whereas when you say things are one nature, that doesn't mean they're exactly the same. So, but in Buddhism, when you hear one entity, it means one nature. Okay. So the reason and the predicate to be proven are of the same nature or of the same entity, such that you can know that the one is there whenever the other is there. For existence, cats and mammals are like this, at least in one direction. Okay? So, a cat is necessarily the nature of a mammal, but a mammal is not necessarily the nature of a cat. Okay? If you have a cat, you have a mammal. Are you a mammal? Where are you? Yeah. Do we have mammals here? Yeah, we're all mammals. Mammal isn't so affectionating, is it? You don't feel affectionate towards a mammal, towards a human being. What?
My sweet mammal.
Yeah, you feel
a cat, but not with a fish.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Cats are mammals, but do you have this feeling of wanting to cuddle a mammal? Like, ooh, pigs are mammals too. Okay. If you have a cat, you have a mammal, right? However, if you have a mammal, you do not necessarily have a cat. The way this sameness of nature is understood is that for two different phenomena, if the one is absent, then the other is absent by necessity, at least in one direction. Okay? So if, this means that if there were no mammals, there would be no cats. However, if there were no cats, there might still be mammals, such as mice and rabbits, and so on. Thus, you understand that the claim that there was a mammal here because there was a cat here is irresistible. But the claim that there was a cat here because there was a mammal here is not. Yes.
Interesting word choice.
Yes, isn't it? When two phenomena of the same nature are mutually inclusive, when the one is eliminated, the other is eliminated also in both directions. Okay, so when they're mutually inclusive, okay, for instance, if somehow there were no products, there would be no impermanent phenomena. In the same way, if there were no impermanent phenomena, there would be no products. Okay. The presence of one proves the presence of the other, and the absence of one proves the absence of the other. The classic example of a syllogism with a nature sign is the subject, the self, is an impermanent phenomena because of being a product. Now, the subject sound. Products and impermanent phenomena are of the same nature. Okay, then the third one, the correct signs of non-observation. The third type of correct sign is a correct sign of non-observation. Whereas you often hear the claim that you can't prove a negative, as defined in this system of thought, a correct sign of this sort must prove a negative. This type of proof may be in regard to either the nature of phenomena or the causes and effects of phenomena. Okay, so something that's a correct sign of non-observation you may be looking at two phenomena that are cause and effect, or two phenomena that are the same nature, or trying to see if they're cause and effect, trying to see if they're the same nature. A correct sign of non-observation that is suggestive of proving emptiness or selflessness is the subject sound is empty of being permanent because of being a product. I think he's going, suggestive of proving emptiness, but there's a whole lot else you have to understand to make that syllogism into something proving emptiness. So the subject sound is empty of being permanent because of being a product. Okay, so the predicate to be proven is a negative. Yeah, empty of being a product, empty of being permanent. The subject sound is the basis of negation, so that is the basis that is empty of being permanent. And the sign of non-observation is in regard to the nature of a phenomena. It is in the nature of products that they are empty of being permanent. Okay? A correct sign of non-observation that explicitly proves emptiness is the subject, the self of persons, is empty of inherent existence because of being a dependent arising. Here he's using the term self of persons incorrectly, because he says in a couple of sentences, here the self of persons must refer to the existent entity of the person. That's not what the expression self of person is referring to. Here, self of person is referring to the inherent existence of the person. So he made a boo-boo. Okay? The predicate to be, so we should say the subject, a person, is empty of inherent existence because of being a dependent arising. Okay, so let's use that. So the predicate to be proven is a negative, empty of inherent existence. The subject, a person, is the basis of negation. That is, the basis that is empty of inherent existence. Okay, then the next sentence, cross it out. Here, self of person must refer to the existent entity of a person. That is incorrect. Okay, not to a permanent, unitary, independent self that does not exist. But that's one of the things that self of persons does refer to. Okay, so this sign of non-observation, too, is in regard to the nature of a phenomena. It is in the nature of dependent arisings, which is mentally inclusive with existence, that they are mutually, what did I say? Mentally inclusive. Mutually inclusive with existence, that they are empty of inherent existence. Okay? So, in other words, if it's a dependent arising, it is empty of inherent existence. And if it is not empty of inherent existence, it is not a dependent arising. Okay. A correct sign of non-observation with regard to the causes and effects of phenomena is the subject on that island in the river at night. There is no smoke because there is no fire. Okay, so imagine yourself standing on a riverbank on a dark, clear night, looking in the direction of a small island in the river that you know is there because you have often observed it during the daytime. You may infer the absence of smoke, the effect of a fire on that island, by the absence of fire, which you would see at night. Here, the argument is put forth to prove the absence of an effect, smoke, due to the absence of a cause, fire. So, yeah, he's doing it the reverse way. Okay. So, but it's based on the idea that on a dark night, if fire were there, you should be able to see the fire. But you could still have a fire on the other side of the island that you can't see. So that's not necessarily going to hold. Yeah. Well, on that island in the middle of the night, there is no smoke because there is no fire. What you're not sure is the property that on that island in the river at night, there is no fire. Yeah, you don't know that because the fire may be beyond what you're seeing. Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, then exercise 8.1. Assuming for each argument that there is someone who is actively seeking to know, remember, that's an important part, make your best guess about what kind of correct sign is in each of the following arguments. So let's do a few. The subject, in this coffee I am drinking, there is no sugar because there is no taste of sugar. Which of the three is that? A non-observation. The subject, a Persian cat, is a mammal because of being a cat. That's one of, being the same nature. The subject, the number 3, is an integer because of being a prime number. Yeah, same nature. Yeah. The subject here in this cave, there has been a fire because there are black smoke smudges on the ceiling. Yeah, that's cause and effect. The subject at the bank during the robbery, John Q. Citizen, was not there because John Q. Citizen was observed elsewhere. Non-observation. Now, you would think from that you could say, that therefore John Q. Citizen will not be convicted of the bank robbery. That is not necessarily true. Because you can be convicted of something that you didn't do. Okay? The subject, this male suspect, has recently fired a gun because of the presence of gun smoke residue in his hand. Cause and effect. By the way, yesterday in a school in California, they were having a class on public safety, and the teacher had a gun, and I don't know what he was explaining to the students about the gun. Maybe they said how to disarm somebody who has a gun. But anyway, he was holding it, and it was aimed towards the ceiling, and it went off. And it hit, this is in a classroom of high school kids, and he pressed the trigger, and it went off, and it hit the ceiling, and so there were particles of stuff and a little bit of shrapnel. 3 students were injured, but the class, nobody stopped to see if anybody was injured. The class went on. One of the boys went home, and his parents said, "Why is there blood on the shirt?" and looked at him, took him to ER right away, and it was because there was some piece of shrapnel in his neck that could have paralyzed this kid or killed him. And the teacher didn't even stop the class in the middle of. First of all, he shouldn't have had a gun or a loaded gun or pressed the trigger. And even if all that happened, should have checked to see if somebody was injured. Yeah. So there were some upset parents, and the students started a petition because this was a teacher they really like, and he was put on suspension, and they said, please don't fire him, because they really like this teacher. But I wonder if the students would have that same petition if that piece of shrapnel that hit the kid in the neck was over a couple of inches and paralyzed him. Yeah, can you believe? This is why we don't want more guns in schools. There was also an incident where some research officer, his gun accidentally discharged in his office. Nobody was hurt. And the school that Barron Trump goes to wrote a letter to the president saying that, he really needs to get on the ball and do something about school safety and preventing, getting rid of guns. Yeah. Good for that principle. Yeah. Yeah, prevent the guns from going in the school. Yeah. Not getting rid of guns, like you drop it in the trash can on your way into the school. Okay. The subject, we did that one. The subject, the sound of a conch shell horn, is a sound because of being a sound arisen from human exertion. Which of the 3? Nature. The subject, a chair, is an existent because of being an impermanent phenomenon. Nature. Okay? So create your own syllogisms with correct signs. Make up at least 3 for each of the 3 types of correct signs. Okay? So do that for next week. Okay? So it has to be syllogisms that are going to work. Okay? But also don't just talk about cats and mammals, you know? You can have, sorry, you know, you can make something, some interesting syllogisms, okay? Yeah?
I don't understand the one about the sound of the conch shell is a sound because it's arisen from human exertion. Is that even?
It's a sound arisen from human exertion. So if it's a sound arisen from human exertion, it's a sound. It's not a sound arisen from your tablet when it's waking you up in the morning. Okay, is that your question?
It's the sound of a conch shell horn.
It sounds in all three parts of the syllable.
Is a sound because of sound arisen from human exertion?
Yeah, you can say that.
It doesn't work for this particular.
No, what you're trying to show is that the sound of a conch shell horn is a sound. That's what you're trying to prove. It's kind of like, duh, of course it's got to be a sound. But there are certain things where we call them something, but it's not necessarily that thing. I can't think of one right now, but there's many things where we call something that, but it's not really that. Yeah, so, huh? What? Human intelligence, yeah. What's your...
Pervasion doesn't work in my mind.
That if something is a sound that's caused because human beings did something, isn't it necessarily a sound?
Yeah, but it's not necessarily the sound of a conch shell horn.
No, but it's not saying that. It's saying the sound of a conch shell horn is a sound because of being a sound produced by human exertion. So the property is the sound of a conch shell is a sound produced by human exertion. That's true. Right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
And if it's a sound produced by human exertion, it's necessarily a sound.
If you can already qualify that it's a sound made by human exertion, then it's a sound.
Yeah, that's why it's kind of a stupid syllogism. It works, but it's not terribly interesting.
Does it relate to those different kinds of sounds, like the sound that's made vocally through human voice, the sound that's made by nature itself, the sound of a brook, those different classifications of sound that I don't have memorized? Is it relating to that? Do you know what I mean?
No.
Okay.
You're saying, are there different classifications of sound?
Yeah. When we
Yeah.
Jeffrey went over them, there were like articulate sounds and non-articulate sounds.
Yeah.
And, things like some things have meaning and some don't have meaning. And there's this classification in the Satantrika that we went over.
Yeah.
And this was one of them. There was a sound of human exertion as one of their examples or something.
Yeah. So
it's a classification that relates to something that is just sort of out of context.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
The other thing somebody just raised, though, it seems in order to be able to realize the syllogism, you have to already have realized it. You have to already know it's a sound, which makes it non-valid.
No, in like I was saying, there's some things where we call it something, but it's really not that. Like we say, I planted a tree when you really planted the seed.
Right, but you have to have realized that it's a sound of human exertion. So you have to have realized that it really is a sound.
Yes.
So then you've already really realized it is a sound and you're trying to prove it as a sound.
they've got like sound in both the predicate and
Yeah,
the reason.
right.
And the subject.
And the subject,
But
yeah.
if the subject, it could be part of its name and not be part of it.
Right.
But it's in the second and third part, which is not supposed to be allowed.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, anyway, we're stopping now. Okay. Yeah, maybe it was late at night when he wrote this or something. Yeah, or maybe, there's things, there could also be things that are called sound but aren't sound that you could say are the predicate that wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, but in that sound is the predicate.
No, I mean the reason, the reason. Anyway, we're stopping. There's a certain point where your brain is not functioning anymore. Yes, it's, the ineffable effulgence of the foundational, innate, clear light that is, a manifestation of the effervescence of the yeah, I understand that.